Alright, so 2520 and 2510 and 25 whatever. Okay. We're going to be using a lot of polygon tools. So we want to make sure that we have a nice set for our polygon tools. So doesn't matter which folder you're in. I'm just going to use 2510 as my folder. Here we go. So I'm going into my Maya folder. Here's my 2015 folder that's already there. I don't know if that's mine, so I'm just going to delete it. I'm going to copy in my copy that I have here. Okay, so I just right click, drag it in, and say copy, and then it copies it. Then I'm going to boot up Maya. So what I want to do is just set up some of the polygon tools that we're going to be using and just give you a brief overview of what those tools are going to do. Okay, 2014 to 2015, there's been a lot of polygon tool movements in here. If you remember from 2014, there were only 2 menus that we typically used, and now there's 3 menus, and they've broken up and kind of redistributed some of these things. And I personally don't care for how they've done it, but it has brought me to the point of just creating my own marking menu and using everything through that, and it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. So I'm just going to make a new shelf here. Let's call it Polygon Mine. And I'm going to go in here and just add some stuff that I know I'm going to need. So I'm going to hold down Control Shift, and under Mesh, I'm going to say Combine. Let's say Extract and Separate. Average vertices I use sometimes. Fill hole I hardly ever use. I'll drop it in there anyway. Smooth I use sometimes. Let's see. Clipboard transfer. No, I don't really use that too often. I really want to get the ones I use a whole lot. Merge components. I use that a lot. Bevel, bridge. So you gotta be careful. There's an extrude vertex up here. There's an extrude edge. I never extrude vertices or extrude edges typically, but I do extrude faces. So I want that. You see, there's also a bridge here, and we already grabbed this bridge, so that's fine. Collapse, extrude, poke, wedge. Don't typically use those too much. Add divisions. Those are good. Okay, so I have up here, once I'm done, I'll go through it again. Append a polygon. Here's the bridge tool, which is actually better than the bridge, so I think I'll actually use the bridge tool. And the bevel tool is pretty nice too. Cut faces tool. You see I'm using a lot of these, but I'm not going to add them all into that list. Insert edge loop tool. There's a multi-cut tool also. I don't haven't gotten like to use that. Quad draw tool, sculpt geometry tool, target weld tool. All right. So there's 17 million things here. All right. So this one here is combine. Starting here, we went to combine, and then this is extract and separate, and move selected vertices to smooth the shape, which is just mesh smooth. Right there. And I did fill hole, and that's all from that menu. Okay, and under edit mesh, there was merge components. I did do bridge. And then I went to extrude. And that was all from there. Then under here, I went to append, the bevel tool, the bridge tool, the cut faces tool, the extrude, not the extrude tool, the insert edge loop tool, merge vertex tool, quad draw tool, sculpt geometry tool, target weld tool. All right, so lots of things in here. All right, so we're going to go back to settings preferences, marking menu editor. We're going to create a marking menu. I'll just give it a name here, Polygon Tool. tools. Okay, seems like a lot of stuff, but you'll see how helpful some of the stuff is. A lot of stuff that you don't use a lot, I'm just going to stick down here in the bottom. So combine, I don't use a lot. Extract, I don't use a lot. Separate, I don't use a lot. I could also right click on these and you can add a separator too if you wanted to, or you can delete, or you can add the pop-up submenu. Alright, so don't be afraid to just drop these in, and then if you don't like what it is, then you could always just take it off. Average vertices. You can see I need to just scoot this down some more. And then fill in a hole. And then smooth. These are all things you just don't use on a daily basis. Merge vertices I use sometimes. So I just set that down there. Bevel. The bevel one I'm going to use up a little bit higher. I use bevels quite a bit. So I'm just going to put this in the top left corner. Let's see, there's bridge. I don't use that one too often, so I'll just drop bridge down here. Extruding I use a lot, so I'm just going to extrude there. Appending I use a bit, I'll put in the corner. The bridge tool I'll put in the bottom right. Bevel tool, bottom left. See how they kind of bevel up there. Cut the faces, don't use that one too often, we'll drop that down here. And you see it's a big, it's a bit of a hassle to set this thing up. But once you have it, you'll be amazed at, how often you're using this as opposed to using the other tools. Well, there we go. Okay, so I can come over here and test it. And you'll see they all have their option box too, so if I need to get to the option box, I can get to the option box as well. Okay, so really cool thing. If you don't like the placement of any of these, you could always right click and then delete it. You could always middle drag to and kind of swap these around if you decided you want these in different spots. You could also right click and say insert a separator, and now you'll have this little separating line here if you wanted to separate how these things are connected. Okay, it just helps organize these things a little bit better. Combine, extract, and separate are typically used together. So typically you'd have those together. So I don't need it, so I'm just going to put it there. All right, so Polygon Tools, save it. I'll click this, and then you can see Insert Edge Loops up here. Bevel, Extrude, Bevel Tool, Target Weld, Bridge Tool, Sculpt Geometry, Append to Polygon, Combine, Extract, Separate, Average, Fill Hole, Smooth, Merge Components, Bridge, Cut Faces, and Quad Draw. Okay, save. Oops, I already saved it, so close. I closed that one too quick. I actually need to go back to it because I have to tell it where I want to be able to use it. So Hotkey Editor, now apply, now close. Okay, so now I can go into my Hotkey Editor, go down to User Marking Menus. Here's my Polygon Tools, and Alt-C, there you go. It says this is toggles the color feedback from Artisan. I actually don't use that hotkey ever, so I'm just going to assign it. Assign. Do you want to set the other one? Yes. Okay, so now we have that. Close, Alt-C. There's my tools. Okay. So you can see, again, just a really easy way just to be able to set up this stuff just so you can use it and make it more functional. I'm going to go through this one, and then another video I'll have some more hotkey stuff so we can make things easier. Alright, so now what do all these things do? So now that we have this, let me just Control Spacebar to get rid of all that stuff so we can actually see what these things do. Alright, so we'll start at the very top. So let me just create a Polygon Plane. Oops, I hit play. And for some reason it's green. We'll just leave it as green. Wonderful. There we go. Maybe my default shader. Nope, it was just a glitch. Okay. So if I turn on this little box here, which is wireframe unshaded, you can see all my division lines. With this many division lines, it's hard to kind of isolate areas that I want to isolate. I'm going to turn my channel box on. And I'm going to go down to my poly plane. I'm just going to take my divisions off. Okay. This way we're starting off basically just like a 1x1 square. So insert edge loop. What this is going to allow me to do is click and drag where I want my divisions to be. If I need a lot of divisions here, but not a lot of divisions anywhere else, then it makes more sense just to kind of draw them in manually where I need them, as opposed to using them all over here and trying to squish them or manipulate them or whatever. Okay. Now, one of the cool things about the Insert Edge Loop tool option box is these things here where it says equal distance from edge. So if I click equal distance from edge, come on. Oh, of course, not going to show up there. I'm trying to do this on a flat object. It's not going to work like that. If I go like this, oops, I go like that, there we go. And then I go back to the tool, and then I use this equal distance from edge. You can see how it's equal distance from the edge. So it follows this thing perfectly. Okay, if I go to this side, you can see how it's following that. If I say relative, it's going to try to keep this relative to this edge. Okay, and I don't really play with these two too often. Special circumstances, I might jump to that one, but not typically. One I like to use a lot is multiple. So here is, I need 5 things equally divided. I switch this to 5. Boom, 5 lines right there, equally set up. I could even say, 1, and it puts a division right down the middle. Okay, so I don't have to worry about, sliding it into the middle. I know it's exactly in the middle. Okay, so I use the option box for that a lot. Okay. All right, so let's go down to another polygon. We'll use a cube this time, and we're going to go to bevel. Okay, bevel has a couple options: fractional or absolute. Just hit apply. You'll see what happens here is it's taking those corners and just cutting them at a 45-degree angle. I come over to my options here and I use my offset. I can play with, there we go, play with the fraction. I can play with the amount that is happening there. Okay. I can also play with the amount of segments, so I can get this thing to be really rounded right here, or really blocky. Okay. Typically, that's all I play with. I play with the fraction and the segments in here. Now, if I change this offset to fraction off, then I'm using the offset and not the fraction. Okay. And sometimes you want to use that depending on the kind of surface you have. With a cube, it's, either one is going to be pretty much the same results. There's Extrude. So you've used Extrude before if you've had any Maya class. I'm going to right click and go to face, grab a face, and then I'm just going to go to Extrude, and then I can pull that out. Maya's acting funny. All my tools stop working. Let's go to Display, UI Elements, Show All. Again, I hit the play button. I think I gotta move my hotkey. I don't know. Alright, so let's try that again. Alt-C, Extrude, there we go. And I'll grab the blue. Okay, typically the blue is going to pull it away from the surface. So Extrude, see how it's pulling it away from the surface? If I were to grab the red, it pulls it down into this. Doesn't really, match there. Green, doesn't really work there. Okay, so I'll use this blue arrow and pull that off. Or what I'll do is I'll use this offset to shrink it in. Maybe I'll extrude again. push it down. I'll extrude again. A little bit of offset. Oops, the other way. Extrude again. Pull it out. Okay, so you can see the kind of shapes that I can get just by adding a couple extrusions. Now the thickness one is a pretty cool one as well. Extruding and then playing with the thickness, you see I was just controlling that right there. Instead of me pulling it out a certain distance, it's just making it thicker. In some cases, that thickness is the one we're going to use. In some cases, it's going to be the division, or the offset. Also divisions, we can add some automatic divisions inside here. Okay, and we'll get into more uses of the extrude tool, but just as a introduction to it. Bevel tool. Okay, in the bevel tool, we can just grab an edge. There it is. There's our bevel. Okay, I can grab a face. And the cool thing about this is I can click and drag. Okay, the bad thing is that I can't really adjust a whole bunch at the same time. Okay, this is more for like I'm just kind of clicking and adding them as I'm going, but not really, you know, like here I could add a whole bunch of bevels just by going to edges. And I'm just double clicking these. Just grab that. There we go. And then go to the bevel, and you see how I have a bevel on everything, and I can control that bevel on everything all universally without having to worry about, you know, getting them individually clicked. Okay, so sometimes I use the bevel tool. Typically I use the regular bevel. The target weld tool is a neat one. It allows us to, let's say we have, you know, here's a bunch of vertices I just want to put together. So I can just click here, drag it there. Okay, so I'm just dragging all of these vertices together, and what it's doing is it's merging them. There we go. Okay, so this does pretend this was open, and I wanted to connect these. So I can just drag this. Come on. Let's go back to target weld. Drag this down here. And you see how it just merges those together. So now they're connected. Okay. So that'll come in handy too, you'll find out. The bridge tool is pretty spectacular as well. Create a cube. I'm going to insert some edge loops. There we go. Now if I wanted to, let's say I had two pieces like this, and I want to bridge between these two. The first thing I have to do is combine them, okay? Because right now this is one polygon, this is one polygon. So I'm going to use combine, which is down here, and that'll put them together into one polygon. Then what I can do, delete the history. So I'm using my Alt-D one while I'm here and deleting the history. Then I can just grab this face, shift-click that face, and go to bridge, which is down here, and it'll bridge it. Okay, or what I can do, go to the bridge tool, grab the faces, bridge tool, and there we go. Now I can click and drag to add the amount of divisions that I have, or that I would need in here. Okay. Now you see how I'm getting some green stuff? Sometimes you'll get this green. It just is an issue with Maya. All we have to do is just go to right click, assign existing, and reassign the default material to it. Alright, I'm stuck on something here. There we go. Okay. So that's the bridge tool. The sculpt geometry tool allows us to manipulate a surface. So let me go and make this here. I'll add a bunch of divisions. Go to the Sculpt Geometry tool, and I'm going to turn off inside here under Display. There's a wireframe. Just going to turn that off. I'm going to turn off this wireframe. Okay. So now this allows me to push, pull, smooth, relax, and then some other ones that are just hidden inside here. So you can see how I can basically just push this surface down, and I'm creating some sort of terrain, or pull. And I can pull this surface up. Okay, so if I needed a quick terrain, instead of me trying to manipulate points individually, I can use this. A lot of times I use this for pushing and pulling this character, and then I can go through and kind of smooth this out. As you get into programs like ZBrush or Mudbox, this becomes kind of like their method of working. Okay. And the more divisions I have here, the more detail I can add. Let's see what else we have in here. The append to polygon. So let's pretend somehow we accidentally deleted a face. Whoopsie. What we can use the append for is, as I go to the append tool, you'll see that this edge, it's a little bit lit up. Okay, these lines here are a little bit thinner, that's a little bit thicker. So if I just click on this edge, you'll see that we get these triangles, and those are pointing towards the direction I need to go. And then I hit enter, and now that's closed off. Okay, and if I click off of it, sometimes you'll see that the face looks a little bit off. Let me try to do this in a different spot and see if we get that. So I'm going back to the append. In this case, it doesn't. Okay, sometimes it will look like that face is off a little bit, but it's still good. All right. So we've covered all of these, and you can see why we would use these a lot. The bridge tool I can probably take out of there. So I like the regular bridge here better than the bridge tool. So I might swap those. We talked about combine. So if we have two separate polygons, we need to combine them. Now Maya reads them as one polygon. So if I go to faces and grab this, I can grab either one of these and they're all combined. Okay. Now what extract will do, let's say I wanted these faces here to be a separate polygon. My button's stuck. There we go. I could grab those faces and say extract. Okay. And now these are two separate polygons. Even though they're touching, they're two separate polygons. Okay. Now if I go to separate, any polygons that are not joined will automatically separate. Okay. And if I wanted to join these back together, I can go to combine. Now that's not separate or putting them together. That's just kind of like putting them in the same polygon. So if I were to hit vertex mode and move this, you can see that it's still open. Okay. They're touching, but they're not actually connected. If I were to go back to separate, they would be separated again because their vertices are not connected. So I go back to combine, and then I can go down here to merge components. And what that does is overall it finds vertices that are touching and merges them together. So now if I go to vertex and I click and I move, you'll see that they are indeed connected. Okay. There's average vertices, and what this does is it just kind of figures out the distance between all the vertices and moves them all closer together. Okay, so it's basically just figuring out the average of all of them and doing that, and to give this softer look to it. So if you were trying to create something that looked more cartoony, that might be a way to do it, just because it softens it a little bit. Okay, if I did it to this guy, you'll see that a lot of that geometry that I have is really getting moved away because it's just kind of averaging out all this stuff. I can even grab a section of vertices and do average vertice on if I'm just trying to smooth out a certain area. Okay, let's just say Sculpt Geometry tool. I go crazy on this thing. Something like this, and I say, holy cow, what have I done? what I can do is just grab all those vertices. There we go. And then I can go to average vertice and just hit G a bunch of times, and you'll see that it just kind of works itself out. It just kind of figures out where it's supposed to be. Okay, really handy tool, especially if you kind of mess up something like that and on a character. Fill hole. It's kind of like append. Okay, so we have a hole, and I would say fill hole, and that hole gets filled. Problem with it though is that it fills all of them. So the bottom of this, which actually wasn't a hole, it fills that in too. I have to delete it. Okay. Also, if we go like this, I can go and isolate the edges like that, and then say fill hole, and it'll only fill this one, and you'll see that it doesn't actually draw the lines across, which we'd want those too. Okay. So I could always go into my mesh tools and go to my multi-cut tool, and individually just kind of go through and redraw in some of this shape here. Okay, so it's a hassle to have to do something like this, but sometimes that's what we have to do. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to draw the whole thing. So that's fill hole. What smooth is going to allow us to do is it takes this shape, and if I go to smooth, you'll see that it actually adds divisions. Undo it and redo it. It adds divisions and smooths it out. Okay, if we hit 3, this is our smooth preview. If I hit 1, that's the actual polygons. So when we go to smooth, it just kind of locks in that smooth preview. And we can adjust, just like everything else, how many divisions we have and how smooth it is. I could add divisions if I take the continuity away. Oh, they moved it, that's why. Take the roundness away. No. It used to work before that you could just smooth it out. Well, they haven't add divisions if you just need to add divisions. But typically that's what we use smooth for, just to smooth things out. Okay. Merge components we talked about, bridge we've talked about, the cut faces tool. Okay, let's go back to insert edge loop for a second. So the insert edge loop takes a quad face, so a 4-sided face, and it can draw lines going along those faces. Okay, individually like this, like that. Okay, but if I get into something like this, what's going to happen is it's going to stop. So you see how it gets right to this edge and it stops. It gets right to that edge there and stops. It gets right to that edge and stops. It doesn't know what to do when it hits something like this. So they invented this other tool called the cut faces. And the cut faces doesn't care. You just click and drag, and wherever this line is, that's where it's going to cut. So you see how it cuts straight across everything right there. Okay, and this can be great for doing some organic type shapes like that, and then going through and just kind of grabbing a section and maybe deleting it out. Okay, so that's typically the only time I use the cut faces. I'm trying to create something more organic looking. Okay, and then we have the quad draw tool, and what this tool allows you to do is basically you redraw Let me make this live. There we go. So I'm drawing dots here. And then what I can do is middle click or right click a shift click, and that allows me to basically redraw my shape. So if I have some messed up piece of geometry like this, just by creating these dots and then using shift, I can rebuild this shape. Okay, and then I can use control, and I can add another division in if I decided I needed it, or I can hold down shift and kind of relax some of these points just so they're a little bit smoother and better organized. And there's another key. And see how I'm redrawing this, and it's keeping the curvature. Let me go over to this area here just so you can see it better. Okay, now it's keeping it flat, so it's going to do its best to maintain the shape. If I don't have enough divisions for it, then I need to add that in there. There you go. So if I hit control and add more divisions, you can see how it kind of matches that shape a bit better. Typically this is used for like character work, just to maintain nice even polygons as you're working with your character. There it is. So control shift, I can delete an edge. And one of these buttons allows me to adjust it more. Okay. So again, I can just redraw this into some nice looking polygons, and it just really helps kind of lay things out correctly so I don't have this big mess here if I wanted to use that. Okay, so that's what the quad draw is. You don't use it a whole lot. When you do use it, it's nice to have it right there. Alright, so I'm just going to hit make live off and just delete my stuff, and now we're good. Okay, so now we know what the tools are for that we added to this. I'm going to close my Maya. That will save my preferences. And now what I can do is, here are my latest Maya preferences with, if I go under my preferences and I go under marking menus, my Polygon tools menu. And I'm just going to delete the ones I had previously saved. And I'm just going to copy my new ones into that folder. Okay, so you'll use these ones over and over and over again, so you want to save them. Eventually, as you become a guru, you will just have a whole list of them, of hotkeys that you are manipulating. And in the next lecture, I'll have another set of hotkeys that we'll be creating as well.